A Funny Taste in Music with Andrew Bird.
Hello, welcome to A Funny Taste in Music. It's a podcast talking to comedians about music, and this one is Ben Norris, a comedian I've known since I started. He was one of them where I used to do the Backyard because it was the first gig that booked me regularly for 20s. Brilliant comedy club, East London, Bethnal Green, Backyard, go to it. And I'd be on first, I'd be young and I was single and drunk a lot, so I'd stay to the end and watch the closing act, which you should do when you're a new comedian, and it was people like Mickey Flanagan, Alan Cochrane, and Ben Norris was always one, and I always thought he was brilliant, and he has now released an album. He's done an album of comedy songs. Now, before you start thinking it's just going to be a couple of jokes with an acoustic guitar, that's what I thought. It's really, really brilliant, catchy tunes. And he's someone I've known for a long time. It's a brilliant, brilliant album. It's called Moral Vacuum, Ben Norris. You can get it on his website, bennorris.co.uk. And I've always really liked him and thought, I bet he knows a lot about music, so I've got to get him on. And he does know a lot because he's made some. Right, so let's get into it. Now, I should say as well, before we got cracking, we're going to hopefully one day release a bonus podcast of the 45 minutes to an hour that was the technical shit show of Ben trying to set up his laptop. It weren't having Chrome. I don't understand any of it. I'm just glad it was him. That was the pain in the ass for once, not me. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. So that took a while to set up, but it sounds all right. Producer Paul has had a mare putting it together probably, but he's done a wonderful job. And now, good news is that there's going to be a Spotify playlist that's going to accompany this. So all the songs we kind of mention in passing where you might think, oh yeah, I might listen to that. And you have to rewind to the bit in the podcast, try and find it. Well, the songs are going to be, you can just go to Spotify, there'll be a link and you'll be able to go and listen to those songs. It'll be easy. So that would be good. So that's going to be with this. So coming up very shortly is my chat with Ben Norris.
A Funny Taste in Music, the interview, next.
All right, ready to go.
Well, it only took us 45 minutes. It's not bad.
I think now we should definitely make sure the podcast is just shorter than how long it took
Yeah.
to get ready. So we're aiming for 44 minutes.
Cool. I've got very little idea of what you're even going to talk to me about.
Yeah, I know.
Is that part of the pleasure?
I think so, yeah. Okay. Should I? Well, I don't know. Do other podcasts prep?
None that I've been involved with.
Well, yeah, I'm basing this purely on when I did a podcast with Rich and I didn't even know he'd press record.
That's a secret weapon.
Yeah, I know. I won't fall for that again. So, yeah, no, you don't really need to know. Just chat about music.
Right.
I thought, because, when when you're on a car journey with comedians.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? We just talk about music. It's kind of that. But it's slightly different with you because you've actually done an album. So you've got a foot in both camps. I wanted to talk about comedians talking about music, but you've actually done an album. So you're pretty much a musician, aren't you?
Well, I think musician would be pushing it, but...
No.
Yeah. I've made some
heard
music.
your album because, well, if for the people who haven't heard your album, I got your because I've gigged with you loads and loads when I first started. You were always headlining, and sometimes you did a rap. You did the rap I really liked. The Colour Is Beige, but from that I wouldn't go. Well, he's definitely a musician, but I didn't know how much stuff you'd written. Then I saw you at the Cutting Edge, and you did America's Mental. And I love that immediately, the sort of thrashy, sort of punky guitar. Yeah. But I didn't know you'd written loads of others. I just thought you were going to just do the odd song every now and again. And then I got your album and I thought it would be, like funny songs with an acoustic guitar. That would sort of be about, there'd be funny punchlines, acoustic guitar. But I didn't know it was going to be like really, really catchy, proper pop tunes and really funny. Yeah. I blummin' loved it. I'm not just saying that.
Thanks,
I've said it to other people when you weren't there and it wasn't recorded. Right, so I properly love it. But what made you do the album? Why did you decide to do it?
Well, I think I'd left music behind many years ago, because there was a point in my life in my mid-20s where I was an amateur musician and an amateur comedian and a professional printer. And I had to make some big decisions. And I was in a band playing bass guitar at the time. I'd been in bands, since I was a teenager. And I think, so I used to write little punk songs when I was 16, and I'd written a few kind of songs over the years, but nothing that had troubled the charts or indeed, a record company. I was in a band with my cousin Jamie, who actually produced my album. And we were in a band called Stigmata Club when we were young punk rockers. And we did, we did hundreds of gigs, and we recorded lots of demo tapes, but we never got a record deal. So we kind of gave it up. And then I was in a band with another cousin called Skipper, and I was playing bass guitar for them when I'd started doing stand-up as an open spot. So this is early 90s. And they threw me out of the band because they thought I wasn't committed enough to the band or something. And that was when the decision was made that I would pursue comedy. So I kind of put music completely on the back burner, and just, comedy's all consuming, isn't it, Andrew? Once you get into it, it's all you think about. Yeah. So I just forgot that I was into music. I'd always listened to music, but I forgot that I liked to play it. And I hung the bass on the wall and didn't think about it literally for 15 years or something. And then one weekend I was doing the Manchester Comedy Store, and I was there for 3 days, and you get a bit bored in the hotel, don't you, as an adult? Yeah. And I walked into a music shop and saw this really cute little guitar. It was a Gretsch Jim Dandy, which is a very retro 50s looking guitar and acoustic. And it was surprisingly cheap. It looked like a guitar that would cost £300 or £400, and it was £160 or something. And I just bought it, just on a complete whim. Went back to the hotel room and sat twiddling around with chords and thinking of little funny ideas, and just songs started coming out of me, just silly ideas for songs, and they were just for my own amusement. I thought that'll do. Because I had started doing the Cutting Edge that you mentioned at the Comedy Store, which is the Tuesday night topical show, they always had one of the acts doing a few songs as part of the show. And I told John, who was the producer of the show, that I'd written a couple of comedy songs, and he was very keen to give me a go. So I started doing a couple of these songs at the Cutting Edge, and that was it. I was completely hooked on, after 26 years of being a stand-up comic, with with the one or two skirmishes into musical things like the comedy rap that you mentioned. Yeah. And many years ago, I used to do a parody of Beetle Bum by Blur, and I changed the lyrics in a very amusing way. But other than that, I hadn't done music in my act much. And suddenly I had this other sort of outlet, and that was it. I just started writing comedy songs, and 2 years later, I had a pile of these songs, and my cousin Jamie, who had remained a musician and had a lovely recording studio, he said, let's record an album and do it properly. So that's why it sounds so good, because, I went in with my little simple songs with an acoustic guitar, and he said, let's record the voice and the guitar, and then let's stick drums and keyboards and bass and everything else on top, and see if we can't make it sound like a real album. And I think that's
you bloody well did that.
We did. Yeah. That was quite a long answer to your first short question.
That's a proper, these are the kind of things when I listen to interviews with musicians, I love them stories. Like that Noel Gallagher got given a guitar by John Squires, and he just picked it up and Slide Away just come out straight away. It sounded like that. You got the guitar, you're in a hotel room, and just a load of funny songs came out. Because the Cutting Edge, I imagine it wasn't too much pressure there to just dick about with the comic. You could really work them all in there, I imagine.
Yes, although on the night I always got terrible nerves, because it is a different. I suddenly realised that performing, as soon as you start a song with a guitar, the audience focus on you in a way that is absolutely, the scrutiny is terrifying. In a way that you don't feel with stand-up. It's weird. And I was very familiar with, words flowing out of my mouth, sometimes pre-rehearsed, sometimes improvised, and how an audience responds to words. But as soon as you say, right, this is a song and it's called America's Mental or whatever, that they're staring at your fingers, they're seeing how you're playing, they're listening to you. Is your voice going to crack? It's just, there's a level of scrutiny certainly you perceive that there is, that feels quite scary. So it took me a while to get over a new kind of nerves to do with, am I going to be good enough at playing these chords and also remembering all the words. That's, I'm quite elderly now, so it's quite terrifying remembering all the lyrics, even though you wrote them.
I didn't think of that. So it was kind of like you were a kind of, proper confident all the way through as a stand-up, then you became like an open spot in the middle as you started music.
Yeah, and that's what I loved about it as well, because music uses a very different part of your creative brain. So, I was really enjoying the novelty of opening up this other side of my synapses or whatever. And there's that I think all comics have a touch of autism. And I think, comedy music taps right into that kind of...
Does it?
Yeah, I think so. That kind of... Well, for a start, as soon as you start rhyming... Yeah. Your head spins with it. You come up with the word at the end of the first line, and you get an instinct that there's a funny song here, and then your brain just starts going through a Rolodex of amusing possibilities that also rhyme with the first word at the end of the first line. I'm a big fan of Neil Hannon, Divine Comedy, and he obviously he writes a lot of serious music. He writes some fairly comical music as well, but he's the master of the well-turned phrase, and really good at finding slightly less obvious rhymes, and that thing of sticking it in with the meter of the beat of it's that there's something going on there where a singer-songwriter can hit that rhythmic, percussive thing with... Yeah,
I know what you mean.
As you can see, if I could do this with music, it would be flowing straight out. But just words, I'm all over the place.
I think the same thing with... I don't know if you think the same thing a bit with Alex Turner, the Arctic Monkeys. He has that, where it's not the normal rhymes and the normal word. And Elbow. I think Guy Garvey of Elbows, like you wouldn't think of putting that there, and some like proper observations. I've always thought that with music, and you're in a good place to answer, where you, because it's hard enough writing stand up, let alone getting it to rhyme. You know what I mean? So, and I've always thought, because I think there's some similar things with writing music. They must have it starts off with just like a way two chords go together, and a song comes out of that. And a bit of material comes out of you've noticed the way someone says something, or you notice just the way a phrase sounds, and that will stick in your head for about 4 years, and finally you'll get a joke out of it. How does it work when you write a comedy song? Do you start is there one on the album that you remember writing that came out of just an idea or just the chords?
Oh, so honestly, so many of them come out of... it's 10 a.m. I've just had a coffee, and I'm most productive on that front in the mornings. I have a coffee and put my guitar on my lap, and it's sort of like relaxation therapy, but it's also ideas just seem to pop out of my head at that time. And I was thinking about this thing I remember reading about once. A lot of creative people, a lot of writers do this discipline called the morning papers, where they get up first thing and they just get a big pad of paper and a pen, and they start writing just anything that comes straight, a stream of consciousness that comes out of their head, and a lot of it's just rubbish, but good stuff pops out as well, because your brain is processing kind of, your dreams and all the subconscious stuff that happens when we're asleep. So I've never done that with that level of discipline, but I do find something similar will happen in the mornings if I just pick the guitar up and sit and twiddle. This morning, I started writing a song. I just had the idea of writing a song about someone who was a bad painter. Because I just think Bad Painter is a good title. And it just came out, just started coming out. It was pretty funny. I mean, it's going to need a bit of work, but,
what have you got so far of it then? Of the song?
Well, I've sort of got enough chords for a verse and a chorus, and the opening lyrics, which I wrote. I always write them straight into the computer these days in case I forget them.
Yeah.
So the lyrics are: you painted a picture of Helen, it didn't look like her. You painted a picture of Rose, not even close. You painted a picture of the Pope. I thought it was an artichoke. You painted a picture of me. I looked like I'd been found dead, face down in the sea. 'Cause you're a bad painter. I guess you might get better later, but you're a bad painter right now. So that's the lyrics.
You wrote that this morning?
I wrote that this morning, yeah.
I've done nothing this morning. Oh. I like the sound of that. Because when you're just strumming notes on a guitar, there's less pressure, isn't there? And you feel like you're doing something, and your mind can wander probably a bit more. But yeah, that is the morning pages, isn't it? Just strumming on a guitar.
Yeah, because I was thinking a lot of my stand-up comes out of improv. I get an idea, but I know it's not long enough. It's like not enough for a bit. So I just start talking about it on stage, and then adrenaline kicks in, and I think of something else in the moment if I'm having a good night, and then I come off stage and try and remember to write that down. And bit by bit, the piece develops, because I haven't got a disciplined brain, but it does seem to work well in the moment. So I realised that writing songs I find much easier actually than writing stand-up, because there's the format of a song, the verse chorus thing suits my sort of semi-autistic brain, I think.
Oh, there's sort of like there's kind of a template there for you to rein you in a bit. Yeah,
and that joy of trying to find suitable words that not only seem to be the perfect thing to say, but also rhyme with the word at the end of the previous line. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like all that stuff, and especially if you can do it unjarringly, if that's a word.
I know what you mean, in a song, where it just flows with a melody.
Yes, and you don't think, oh, he's just put that in there because it rhymes with bucket, Not many things do.
Well, it must have been tempting. That's what I like a lot. Some of my favourite bits in your album is the bits where there's a very obvious rhyme and then you don't do it. There's a bit that every time fills me with joy. I think the Jack White song. You got a song about Jack White wanting to play your guitar, and the bit "Meet me at the front." Jack White seems determined to make me look a bad guitarist. Every time I get this little tingle of excitement. Here it comes. There it is. Bloody love that. Your album.
Thanks,
if you
mate.
read your album, the track titles, it's that Ducks, Jenny, Liebrows, America's Mental, 9 Little Boxes, Older with Dignity, Robot Sex Doll, Jack White, Dogs, Pope, Fight the Police, Dick Pic. It sounds like a set list for closing the Comedy Store Late Show. But
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it sounds like your crib notes for gags. Yeah,
I was pleased with that song.
I was pleased with the fact that if you look down those song titles, you don't have to know much about me or even what the album is. It would pique your interest, wouldn't it? At the very least, think, what a weird group of song titles that is.
Yeah, good. I didn't think of it like that. Good point.
What can this be?
You'd need to listen to a song that goes Jack White, Dogs, Pope, Fight the Police, Dick Pic. Because I listened to, I got your album straight away. I I'll be honest, I kind of, when a comedian I like does something, I feel that we should, like, because comedy, you've never ever got anything really to show for it. So the fact that you've got recorded something and got something to show for something is an achievement in itself, I always think. So I always think, well, I've got to buy it. Someone's written a book, a comedian's written a book, I think, well, I should support them and buy it. So I bought your album out of, I know it'll be funny, I know it'll be good. I should buy it, support a fellow comedian. I didn't honestly, I didn't think I'd love it as much as I did. And I texted you straight away when I listened to it because, and my wife sent you a videoing my children listening to one of your songs because I kept listening to it in the car and I forgot some of the bits in it. And my 2 kids are in the back, one's 6, one's 9, and they absolutely love the dog song it's got a bit about, it's basically a thing I've always that you've probably that song, I imagine it started from the observation of dog walkers, what weird people they are, stood around. And now I've become one of them because I've got a dog, and I've become the loser that I used to slag off. Just all stood around talking about nothing with your doggy treat bag on your front. But the bit of your doggy sniffing
each other's butts
and lick each other's nuts. That bit, for a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, you can imagine how much they enjoyed that. We must have played it about 12 times in the car, and then I had to pick up his mate for football to do the football run, and they were saying, put that song on, I'll put it on, and they're all laughing their heads off and singing about licking nuts and sniffing butts and stuff, to the point when I dropped him off, I had to knock on the door and explain to his mum why he might be singing that, and apologise to his mum.
That's
she was fine with it.
I mean, the album is full of swears, and because I do think it's big and clever. But no, I mean, just we did 2 radio edits actually, just in case, the vaguest chance that somebody who had a radio show wanted to play something, because otherwise, if we hadn't done that, they couldn't have played a single track off the album. But we did 2 where we'd replace
the clean versions of Ducks and Jack White.
And yes, exactly. And Liebrows.
The proper catchy songs to the Jenny. That stuck in my head for days. That song, that's really, really catchy. They're all catchy. The Jack White song, is that just a story you've made up in your head?
Unfortunately, yes. I've never met him, but I thought it wouldn't. I'd always wanted to do a story song. The songs with an actual narrative arc that tell you something that happened and it begins and with a middle and an end. And that idea just popped into my head. Wouldn't it be amazing if you knew Jack White and he came round your house and you had all your mates round and he asked you to play his guitar, play your guitar in front of him? How intimidating and horrible that would be. And also how you wouldn't want him to play your guitar either, because all your friends would see how good he was and how awful you were in comparison. So that was the idea for the song, really. That Jack White would be one way or the other. Jack White being in my house would be a bad thing, and the idea of him. Me pretending I didn't have a guitar that he could play, and hiding it in my car and all this sort of stuff, and him running off and finding one, but then suggesting that I play it. That was the turnaround in that song. But again, once you got the idea, it just offers itself up. It seems as a format for finishing that story off.
Yeah.
But no, I've never met him. I'd love him to hear the song. It'd be great if he heard it.
I think he'd find that funny, surely.
I hope so.
He's a proper cool bloke, Jack White. You'd think he would be.
He seems pretty cool.
I love that. Are you a big fan of the White Stripes? Do you like Jack White?
Yeah.
Have you seen that documentary with him, Jimmy Page, and The Edge? What's it called? This Might Get Loud.
I have seen that, yeah.
It's blooming brilliant, isn't it? I was already a big fan of him before that, but after that I thought, sweet Jesus, he's good. But
he owns a record shop, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he's got an independent label that he's released stand up on his independent label.
Has he?
Like stand up specials. People that have just
That's
released
cool.
like CDs, or he's releasing stand up as well. God bless him. The other song on the album that stuck in my head for days, "Dick Pic." That's one. That's one. Not to be humming around the house with young kids as well. I was just humming that around the house. Click, click, dick pic in front of my kids. My wife had to elbow me. But yeah, so you made the album with your cousin Jamie. So you're in a band with Jamie. What was the name of that band again? Stigmata Club.
We were called Stigmata Club.
That's a cracking
both of us we were both brought up Catholic, and we didn't enjoy that experience. So as 18-year-old punk rockers, we were determined to stick two fingers up at that ludicrous church. Other churches are available, but they all make you feel guilty. So Stigmata Club was the name of the band. And yeah, Jamie was the drummer to start with, and then he swapped over to become the guitarist, and we bought a drum machine. I was the bass player, and we both did backing vocals or main vocals. We took turns. And well, we tried various other people in the band. We had two different drummers and two other guitarists, and they always left because I think Jamie and I were too insular, and because we were cousins, it was. I think it was quite. There wasn't much space for another ego in the band. But anyway, Jamie was
That's honest of you now. That's honest of you now. In retrospect,
yeah, I
later.
don't think I thought that at the time, but looking back at it, I think that was the case. So we were progressing from a sort of punk band, and things were lots of different things were happening at that part of the 80s. The Beastie Boys came out, and punks like us were starting to go to kind of club nights and listen to, we used to go to this thing called the Boiler House, which was, like an alternative dance night, and they were playing all sorts of crossover alternative stuff that was going into dance, and things like, obviously New Order had brought out Blue Monday, and there was things were going a bit more dancey, and you'd suddenly hear acts that you thought of as being sort of an indie guitar band would suddenly have a drum machine backing
tune,
and a dance. There was a dance crossover thing happening, and that influenced us, and I started slapping the bass. Oh my God. Yeah, I've got my bass here. I'll see if I can. I don't know if you're going to hear this.
You're going to recreate a slap?
I'll see if you can hear this. This is the sort of thing that I started doing with the band. You might not be here, but can you hear that at all?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That kind of thing.
A bit more dancey. So as a band, you were changing so much, you weren't really even sure yourselves what you were doing, so you couldn't really get someone to fit in that, I imagine.
There was a lot of experimentation. We were calling it punk funk, what we were doing, and
why is that never put on as a genre?
we weren't the only people to coin that phrase. It has to be said, but we thought we were at the time, and then we realised that other people had used the same expression. And there were quite a few bands, like there was a band called A Certain Ratio from Manchester. I don't know if you remember them, but they were doing some of that kind of stuff, a bit of bass and drums led percussive alternative music.
So this was late 80s.
Yes, this would be probably about 88, 87, 88. About around that time.
Where was it you grew up?
So this was we were living in Farnham at the time, Farnham in Surrey. I was born in Aldershot, down the M3.
So were you going into London a lot? Gigging in London mainly?
Well, no.
In
most of our gigs were in the local village halls and that sort of thing at that level. But we did start getting gigs in Brighton. For some reason, we had some connections in Brighton. We did a gig at the Zap Club, which was a famous Brighton live venue at the time, which we thought that was us. We thought we were going to get signed up that night and, become a proper outfit. But of course, it's, we were just a support band on a whole bill of other bands, and things don't turn out how you hope quite often in the pop world. But we had a lot of fun. But Jamie, to get back to Jamie, he's carried on being a musician. He's got his own albums out, and he's got his own little studio, and we recorded it in there. And he's just really good at taking my ideas and putting a gloss on them and making them sound much more professional than I imagined that they could have done. So that's why that album sounds like a real album, doesn't it?
Yeah, like Ducks sounds like, I might be wrong, tell me if I'm wrong, it sounds like sort of late 60s poppy kind of, like slightly psychedelic,
bit
late
60s production, maybe a bit of Supertramp in there. It's definitely got that influence. And he's really good at creating or recreating sounds that you're familiar with from old recordings. So, Jenny, I think sounds, could be got a touch of the kind of Amy Winehouse backing band about it. There's a bit of that sound to it. And there's a few genres.
Chainsaw.
Chainsaw, yeah.
That stuck in my head for days as well. Right, yeah.
You don't want a chainsaw stuck in your head, mate.
So you sort of got kicked out of the band, is that right? On the last band you're in,
that was the other band, yeah. So Jamie and our band Stigmata Club split up because Jamie was moving to Brighton and doing other things, and I got in another band, notably a band from that area, Aldershot area, called Skipper, with my other cousin Jimbo, and we probably were going for about a year, but I was doing stand-up by then, doing open spots. Yeah. And I think the band thought I had split loyalties, especially if I did gags between songs at our gigs, which I did do a couple of times.
Did you really? You were crowbarring in material? Well, I can understand that. Yeah. But I love that. I remember you were trying to crowbar
we did a New Year's Eve gig at the West End Centre in Aldershot, and one of the guitarists snapped a string, and he said, "Sorry, I'm going to have to change this string." And I said, "Don't worry, I'll fill this gap." Stepped up to the mic and did some jokes, and the audience enjoyed it, but the band looked furious.
Really?
Because they wanted to be taken seriously. Well, I might be exaggerating.
You're doing some pretty. They want to be taken seriously, and you're doing some open spot level observations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
it was a taste of things to come.
Yeah, that was the thing. Well, they made it out worse than it was, apparently, with Billy Connolly and Jerry Rafferty, that they were in the band together, and the gaps between songs got longer and longer, didn't it? And they made out Jerry Rafferty was annoyed by it, but I imagine he was laughing his ass off at Billy Connolly. But
it's a great place for us to try stand-up, isn't it? Because no one's expecting a musician to be funny at all.
Oh,
so if you're even vaguely amusing, you're like, well, he's pretty funny for a keyboard player, but no one's expecting it. So it's a low bar.
Yeah. It's a shame there's no way of trying material out there. It's pretty ambitious to crowbar that in to get on a music night, just to get in a new bit of material, learn an instrument, all of that. Just try out one new bit. But so so then you just went full into stand up. But what music were you into? It's an obvious question. Before you were in the band, because have you got older brothers or sisters?
I have two older sisters and an older brother, and I was the youngest. And a lot of my early music. Well, actually, I say that the very early music. I was into music quite young, like a lot younger than most people. Certainly, I was the first person in I bought Bohemian Rhapsody when it came out. I remember going to buy the single, and that came out in '74, and I was 7. So that's quite
wow.
That's quite young, isn't it? I went off and bought,
to buy a song. That's really young.
Went off because I think I used to get 25 pence pocket money, and that's roughly how much a single cost at the time. So every Saturday I went out and bought a single, and I bought things like 10cc's, The Things We Do for Love. That was, I think, one of the very first singles I bought. And so, yeah, Queen. I was into Queen. And I remember that Christmas I asked for a Queen album for Christmas. It was my first album. And then I used to buy those kind of pop compilation albums.
Yeah.
And then
But
my
that's
sisters
quite
and brothers
normal.
started buying records.
Yeah. I see you got your older siblings into music.
Well, they not
kind of.
I think kind of. Yeah, I just looking back at it, I was buying records before they were. But then my brother
That's
was coming
weird.
home in '77 with all these punk singles, and I loved it.
See, that's
I
normal.
was so excited by it. Yeah,
Yeah.
these punk singles were so they just hinted at this grown-up world that I had no access to, because I was 10 years old in 1977 and I wasn't going to up to London to watch these punk bands, but I really got excited by them. So bands like the Stranglers were huge, and still one of my favourite bands to this day. And so my brother did eventually have a huge influence on my music tastes, but it's just that I was going out and buying, Shawaddy Waddy and Mud singles before he was buying anything.
That is such a funny image. You at the age of 7 with your pocket money going into a shop to buy a single. Just, I probably wasn't, but in my head, it's in like a proper record shop or HMV, and you're saying to the bloke behind the counter, "Yeah, I preferred the earlier stuff."
Actually, it was Woolworths. It was Woolworths in Farnborough.
I still love buying music in Woolworths.
They used to have this set of K-Tel albums. I don't know if you're much younger than me, so you won't remember this, but they had these albums that were much cheaper than all the other albums, and it took me years to work out why. It was because they were covers of the pop hits that you were actually after. So they used to have they'd put a band together and cover contemporary pop tunes.
Yeah.
And record them like a greatest hits album, and sell them for like £2 instead of £5. But they weren't the original artists, and people
have
would buy
fallen
them.
foul of that.
It's astonishing.
Yeah, no, I have fallen foul of that. Yeah. Oh, you feel like such a fool. But you remember
This isn't Cliff Richard.
You remember at the age of 10 getting into punk. I thought I was into music quite early, but I think that's really young. So at 10, that must have blown your mind at 10, punk as well. What was your... Because you had
scary.
So you
All
had
I
a
remember
Catholic
thinking-
upbringing,
Yeah.
and you were a 10-year-old
remember
listening
thinking-
to punk.
Well, I tell you, I distinctly remember sitting in a caravan. My parents were into caravanning. We weren't, but we had to go. And
How it goes, yeah.
they also used to meet up with this other family, and they would go, this is terrible, but my parents would go off to the country club, as they called it. It was basically the dodgy boozer on the campsite. And they would go off there and leave us, quite young children, because my older brother was, I don't know, say, he was like 14 at the time.
That's a responsible adult in the late 80s.
He was the responsible adult, and they would leave us with the other family's kids as well. We would sit in this caravan and one of the other kids had taped the top 40 charts on a cassette recorder, and we would sit and listen. This was about 1977, 78. And I remember listening to Peaches by the Stranglers, which is an outrageous song, really, about, it's sexually excited young men looking at bikini-clad young women on the beach. And the word clitoris is in the song, much to our amusement. I don't think we knew what it was, but we knew it was rude. Because he says, is she trying to get out of that clitoris? Liberation for women. That's what I preach. Preacher man. It was so exciting. And Hugh Cornwell goes, in the song quite a lot, which again, just for our Catholic minds, just sounded so rude. We loved it. And we just played that song over and over again, sort of giggling to ourselves into this window into this adult world, while our parents were getting smashed in the country club. Great days.
Yeah, in a caravan. Yeah, I remember that. We went camping, and it was, and the shower blocks as well. They literally at that age, your parents just sent you off to shower with strangers.
To shower strangers?
Shower whiff. It drops out then whiff.
Okay,
shower with
that's important.
strangers in a yeah, that's important. In a shower block. It's called the shower block as well. The other place it's called a shower block is a prison. Should have been a
It's
clue.
true. It's true.
Yeah.
There was an awful lot of trust, wasn't there, in the 70s and 80s when it came to childcare, and I
Yeah.
think we're finding out now that that wasn't such a good idea.
Some of it has backfired massively.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so you got into punk. So your first bands were like really punk. What punk bands? You said the Stranglers, and then what other punk bands were you really?
Well,
into?
it was really just listening to my brother's records because suddenly my my Shawaddy Waddy singles looked a bit lame, and I was sneaking into my brother's room and borrowing albums off him. So it was things like Stiff Little Fingers and the Dickies and the Dead Kennedys and oh God, just loads of those sort of, obviously the Sex Pistols and the Damned and 999 and Killing Joke. Killing Joke became a huge band for me and still are. I love them.
I've not heard of them.
You've not heard of
great
Killing
name.
Joke? Oh,
No, it's a
yeah,
great
amazing.
name.
Well, it is a great name, and in fact, the comic novel of the same name, I believe, is named after the band rather than the other way around. The Killing Joke's first album, I think, came out in 1978, and it sounds amazing to this day. If you get a chance to listen to it, it just sounds like future music, and really scary too. Jazz Coleman, the lead singer, has this just this growl and this presence that is unlike any other frontman I could think of. And he used to wear kind of war paint on stage, and just a really exciting band. Yeah, really loved them. But the first music sort of scene that felt like my own instead of my big brother's was when Two-Tone started. So about 79, there was a ska revival and the Two-Tone scene, the Specials, and Selector and The Beat and Madness, all of that came out, and that I felt, right, this is mine. By then I was 12, just about turned 13, and I immediately got a skinhead haircut and Dr. Martin boots and, bleached my jeans and persuaded my mother to buy me a Crombie coat, the long black Crombie, because I needed a winter coat for school, and she seemed to think it was a pretty sensible looking coat. But of course I knew it was absolutely the coolest thing. And you could pull the lining out of the top pocket to look like a red handkerchief. And we all used to put white laces into our DMs to show that we were anti-Nazi skinheads and not the fascist variety.
I didn't know that was a distinction. Laces in Doc Martens.
Laces in the Nazis used to wear red laces, and we used to wear white laces, so that people could see at a glance that we were anti-fascist. And
that was all it took. Your laces.
Very important when you're 13.
Yeah.
And I went to see the Specials. At the Bracknell Leisure Centre, and it was the most terrifying night of my life to this day. There was
How old were you then?
constant. Well, I think 13.
Right.
My parents only let me go because my older sister, who was then 15, accompanied me. My sister Lisa took me, and it was violence from the get-go, but long even before the gig started. We were waiting outside Bracknell Sports Centre, and because Two-Tone brought together these different factions, mods and skinheads and rude boys, and none of them got on very well with each other. And some of the skinheads were, frankly, moronic Nazis, and others were kind of into it for the kind of Jamaican rude boy culture. And then there was the mods who, were wearing the parkas and the suits, and there was just carnage outside this gig as all these different factions turned up and started punching each other. And, they seemed like adults to me. They were probably about 17, but I was 13, and that felt like I was in a dangerous place. And the gig had to be stopped about 5 times while the band fought various members of the audience. It was amazing.
Jesus.
What an amazing experience,
I've never been to a gig. I've never been to a gig like that as an adult. I can't imagine that.
It was so common. It was so common. I mean, all the punk gigs I went to as a teenager, there was always a fight would break out. 2 songs in, suddenly we'd all be chicken dancing anyway, that kind of slam dancing.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you couldn't tell if it was a fight or not, but every now and then suddenly the band would stop. The band would stop and say, right, break that up. And you'd suddenly turn around and there'd be 4 guys kicking 7 shades of shit out of each other. And that just was a common thing. Violence was so much more regular in the 70s and 80s than it is now, thankfully. But it was scary times. I often spent half my times at gigs thinking I might get beaten up any moment. I'm so glad that's over.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine the gigs I've been to. It's very much more working together in a crowd surfing kind of communal event, not beating the shit out of each other. So sometimes you'd be looking at people thinking, them two, they're into this song. They are loving this, and they'd be beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
So you were 13. Yeah. How old are your kids now?
They are 14, just about to turn 15 next week.
Oh, can you imagine them going to that now? What music are they into?
I've given them a good education, I think. So they like quite a lot of the music that I like. So they like a lot of indie, alternative, and punk music. My daughters are in a band called Scouts. So Lola plays the drums and Evie plays guitar, and at the moment they're just doing covers, but they're covering bands like Arctic Monkeys and
nice.
Quite cool stuff. I'm quite proud of them.
Yeah, you should be proud of that. They've not asked you to join, no?
I keep volunteering to come in and play bass, but they look at me like I've just said.
I feel awkward. Hearing about it. I've got to be honest.
Yeah, no, they don't want their dad in the band, and I don't get that. But what can you do?
Yeah, but yeah, I'm 13 going to gig. My first ever gig was very mundane. It was going to see Bob Dylan with my dad, which sounds pretty cool when you say it like that. But that was at Wembley Arena, miles away. Couldn't even see him. And it was sat surrounded by old men that had a list of every Bob Dylan gig they'd been to, and they were telling us about it, like train spotters.
Yeah,
it's very
still
much
you got to see Bob.
I saw Bob Dylan at the age of, I think I was 14, I think, or something like that.
And was it one of those gigs he does where he hardly plays anything that anyone likes, or
yeah, it was.
Did he play some of the hits?
It was one of them, and you just heard proper Bob Dylan geeks all around you complaining the whole way through. Going, he's lost it. He's lost his voice. Voice is gone. It's gone.
Judas.
Yeah, yeah. Old school. Judas. It's over, mate. All right, yeah. But yeah. So you were where you were in, and then when did you? What age were you when you first in a band? I mean, when did you start learning to play the guitar?
I think I asked for a bass guitar for Christmas when I was 12. So
why bass straight away at 12?
Because I really got excited about the idea of guitars. I didn't know much about them, but I knew that, I've been watching Top of the Pops since I was an amoeba, and guitars just looked cool, and bass guitars only have 4 strings. So that seemed to be a good place to start.
It's got to be easier.
It's got to be easier. I reckon that's why most people learn the bass, because it's got 4 strings. I didn't even know they were lower. I didn't know they were the lower register. I just thought 4 strings. That's the one for me. So I got my very first 3/4 length bass guitar, Starburst, like a Fender copy.
Right.
Very much a copy because it was very cheap. But it was my Christmas present. So what would that be? When I was 12, yeah. And my dad made me some kind of weird amp he cobbled together from a PA system from a scout hut or something, and that was how I started playing the bass. And I got a band together almost immediately, and we were called Sus, which was at the time there was this the Sus laws, which is I don't know if you remember, but the police were allowed to pull people over and search them if they were suspected of carrying a weapon or being a part of a crime, and it was very controversial at the time and often used on young black men. So we were reading all about that kind of stuff in the magazines that we would buy. So we were trying to be a punk band, and we were 12 years old.
Jesus, that's quite politically aware as a 12-year-old. I can't imagine that conversation.
Precocious, I think.
Yeah,
I wrote songs. I wrote one called "Kill Ronald Reagan Before He Kills You."
At what age? About 13 or something?
I think about 12 or 13. Yeah, kill Ronald Reagan before he kills you.
Didn't even know who the Prime Minister of England was at 13.
Yeah, well, this was when Ronald Reagan was president of America, and we thought that was the worst it could ever get.
Oh yeah,
halcyon days.
Yeah. I remember clearly when we thought, can't get worse than Bush. That seemed like the lowest of the low, didn't it?
Yeah.
But
now he seems like a top geezer in comparison.
He seems like a funny uncle now, doesn't he? But I love the thought of that. You have so how many were you in this band that you had a discussion? What name are we going with? Nothing to do with trying to attract girls or anything. It's like, have you read about this law with the police where they can just search black men? Even that's what we should go with, chaps.
The drummer wasn't into punk at all. He was a really smooth kid. I can't remember his name, but he had a lovely, expensive drum kit, and he just wanted to play in a band. And his dad would bring him every Saturday afternoon. His dad would drive him over, and with this full drum kit, and unload the whole kit and put it into where we used to practice in my mum and dad. My mum and dad ran a day nursery for kids. So we had this building at the back of our house that was essentially a nursery, for little preschool kids. But it was a great space to practice. So we would set up in there. And so this bloke's dad would set up his expensive drum kit, and he would bang away for an hour or two. And then his dad would come and pick him up again and pack up his beautiful, pristine drum kit and put it in his car and drive him off. And I don't think he liked anything we were doing. He didn't like punk or anything. Not that what we were doing, had any level of credibility, but it was a noise, that's for sure. And the other member of the band, who I think might have been another cousin at that point. I have a lot of cousins, Catholics, you see. I think he just had a little Casio keyboard, and we were rubbish. We were absolutely awful, but it was good fun. And it was a fairly early start to be writing songs, and I wrote lots of angry political songs at the age of 12. God knows why. Don't know what I was trying to, who I thought I was, but wrote another one about war, an anti-war song, and I seem to remember it went, thousands of acres of plain white crosses. They fought, they died, but did they count their losses? For 100 yards of dirt, it cost 100 lives, 100 years, 100 tears, 100 widowed wives. Wow.
Wow, that
12.
Is deep for a 12, 13-year-old, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I was in CND.
You could do a whole album or show of your 12-year-old Ben Norris material. Do it do it very, really straight and serious.
Do it really earnest. Yeah.
From the point of view of a 12-year-old, this is how. That's hilarious.
It's quite sweet, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you could be. I mean, some 12-year-olds' diaries are funny, but no one was writing songs that deep at 12. Wow. But it sounds like that drummer was literally using you as a rehearsal studio. Definitely.
He didn't like what we were doing at all, but his dad was obviously so keen for him to be a drummer that he was putting all the yards in, driving him around. And I think he might have actually been in 2 or 3 other bands at the same time. But when you're a young musician, that's what you need to do, isn't it? You just play anywhere and everywhere to get the hours in.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they were, as a family, they were mugging you right off. They're taking the piss.
Yeah.
I like the thought of you rehearsing, surrounded by kids' drawings and a sand pit and everything.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was like. Tiny little yellow chairs.
Yeah, and so then you were in more serious bands as a teenager. So so that would be you'd say that was the music of your generation, was a the Specials and Madness and that. Would you say that was kind of the music you grew up on?
Yeah, I was saying, wasn't I, that after kind of being getting the foundations of punk from my big brother, it was the two-tone movement that was the first movement,
like that was
musical
yours.
movement that felt like was mine, that I could really own it. And I went out and got my head shaved as soon as I possibly could. My mum hated it, but I loved it.
I've got to say, from the point of view now as an adult, they never mention this with skinheads, but I know you well, and you've got a lovely head of hair. I've always said that about you. It seemed now, even in retrospect, it feels like a real shame. But so you have full Doc Martens and skinhead. Didn't I see recently on Facebook? Didn't you give your daughter's got short hair? You gave her a skinhead.
Yeah, well, Lola has been experimenting a lot with her hair, and she had she in the first lockdown. Yeah. She asked if she could have a skinhead haircut, and we shaved her head, and she went for the full. Me with the approval of my wife.
There it is. Wow.
And she went for the full. She went for the full look. The Ben Sherman button-down shirt and the jeans and the DMs. She's already grown out of that, so she's gone through 2 more looks since then. She grew out the skinhead and spiked it up and then bleached it. So she went for the full kind of early 80s punk look. And now she's dyed it brown again because the school got really angry that she'd bleached her hair, so she's had to dye it back to brown. And she's really experimenting with her looks quite a lot. She's into fashion.
Through lockdown, she's gone through, like, how was your lockdown? She's gone through musical genres.
She has, definitely, yeah.
I'd like. Did you take that phone call from the school, or was it just an email?
It wasn't a call. She came back with a note.
Right.
Saying that she had to sort it out. So, reluctantly, and after a couple of weeks of resistance, we acquiesced.
Well, isn't that weird, though? You think of, like, kids of you and your brother's age doing that kind of thing and angering parents in school. And now, as a parent, you're encouraging your child to have a skinhead and getting her in trouble with school.
Well, I just really like the look. And it suited her.
I did see the photo. She did look proper cool.
But like I said, she's already moved on. She's moved on. I think she's going to change. She's a bit Bowie-esque. She gets tired after about 2 or 3 months of a look and wants something else. And I think that's great.
Yeah. I love that. Having a go at you for being a square dad, going, oh, Dad, punk and skinhead. That's so March, April time.
Oh yeah,
exactly. That's early lockdown genre.
Yeah.
So you, what do you still buy albums, or are you Spotify now?
Well, I still download albums and pay for them, if you know what I mean. And I had started to use a subscription service. In fact, Google Play, which has just this week disappeared. I don't know if you know anything about this, but it's really annoying. Google Play have shut down and handed over all their stuff to YouTube Music. So I had to go in and find a way of getting all the albums that I bought and downloading them onto another app so I could keep them, which is one of the things I really hate about that odd kind of cloud world of music being up in the cloud. And it used to be you'd go off to the shop and buy a physical thing and you owned it. And now you can buy an album and you don't know if you do own it or where it is, or is it on your phone, or is it on your laptop, or is it in the cloud, or has it disappeared altogether? And there's something disconcerting about that. And I miss the album artwork and all the plus sides of a physical thing. So a few years ago, I am one of those guys who went and re-bought a record player and started buying vinyl again. And I'd forgotten the joys of vinyl. I know a lot of people slag people off for being, musical snobs with the vinyl, but it does have a deep and rich sound that can't be replicated. And if you've been listening to MP3s for 20 years, like I have, you forget how good vinyl sounds, or even how good a CD sounds straight off the CD through a good system. It sounds better and warmer and more real than
Well,
MP3s do.
Well, we've talked a lot about being Luddites because of the hour and a half setup it's taken us all to get this
The
happening
technical issues, yeah.
with laptops. But I'm proper Luddite with that. Well, I remember I bought a few songs on my phone. I don't know what it was on. Can't remember what it was on. And then just bought a new phone. Had to upgrade my phone, and all that music went. It wasn't that much, but from then on, I thought, I'm not doing that again. I'm still purely CDs.
Well, I think that's cool.
Did you hear that story of somebody, I can't remember what, who bought, had a massive album collection on on the cloud or whatever it was, and then when he died, his family wanted it, and you're not allowed to pass that on.
That's so weird. It's like he died and so did his music.
Yeah, it was his. He doesn't own it. It's like he's renting it. It's not like like you say, like a vinyl collection in the loft of your dad's that you can look through. It's gone with him.
So his family need to track down a sort of musical Derek Acora and see if they can see if he could channel the record collection out of.
I'm getting something. I think it's Bohemian Rhapsody. But yeah,
it's coming through now. It's coming through. It's the Skids into the valley.
prefer the earlier stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your record collection. Your record collection must be massive. You started at 7 buying Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
Must be
although
huge.
I don't have a lot of my the singles that I bought when I was that young have all disappeared. But I've got almost everything I bought from probably the early 80s onwards. I've still got all of that.
Lovely.
Apart from some of my two-tone records, that I gave away. This was really weird. When I got back into punk, so there was sort of two punk seasons for me. There was my brother's punk, and then I got into two-tone, and then I got into anarcho-punk bands like Crass and Flux of Pink Indians. I don't know if you've heard of any of these bands, but they were very political and very angry, and sort of very kind of anarcho and vegetarian and anti the system. Very, very my stuff, and very, very exciting. So suddenly, when I got into that, I kind of rescinded all my two-tone, and I gave a lot of it to my cousin Martin, who's now the famous actor Martin Freeman. Do you know his work?
I've heard of him.
Martin Freeman. He's reasonably.
So when you
well-known.
saw him on The Office, all you were thinking was, he's
got my Selector album. Yeah, yes, he has. He's got a lot of my old two-tone, and I thought one day he'll give it back, but he never did. But because he came to stay at my house. Completely. He came to stay at my house when he was, I don't know, I was, I guess 15, 16 by then, and he was 11 or 12, and I gave him a number of Bad Manners. That was the other. I gave him my Bad Manners albums. Oh my God.
And he took those great. Bad Manners and he took it on. He never returned your albums.
Yeah, exactly. He showed his Bad Manners, mate.
Yeah. So you gave him a bit of a music education, but you gave him that. You've got to listen to this, that kind of thing.
I definitely think I influenced him a bit, but he's consequently become a much bigger muso than me. I mean, his record collection is absolutely enormous. I mean, and goes into lots of obscure sort of soul artists you've never heard of, and he's absolutely trained spotter of music. He is, and he does BBC Six Music. He does whole shows of stuff that you've never heard. So, and albums. He's got albums out of him, and is it Keb Darge, the DJ? He and Keb, I think, have put albums out together, and of compilations, of stuff they like. So. Yeah,
but you were an early influence of that. That's good.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So you've got still got a lot of your art. So if your kids, have they gone through your stuff? That must be like a treasure chest. Some of that stuff for your kids at their age.
Yeah, although not as much as I thought they would, because my daughter Eve bought a record player, and I said, well, I've got tons of vinyl. If you're really careful with it, you can listen to it. But she hasn't really dipped into it that much, which is perhaps she will in the next year or two. But at the moment, she's got her 3 or 4 albums on vinyl that she loves, and she just plays those. But I think probably we all were a bit like that at that age. I think it was years before I realised how good the Beatles were. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I knew who they were when I was a kid, but I didn't give a toss about them until I was in my 20s, probably. You know?
Well, I know what you mean. You've got to sort of discover it. I had that with the Smiths. Like,
Yeah.
I clearly knew they were amazing, but you have to discover them for yourself. If people keep telling you, you're like, yeah, all right. But yeah, the Beatles. I watched that when the Beatles released Anthology. They released like and they had the documentary on the telly, and they released their first single in 25 years or something. Free as a Bird. Remember that on the telly as a 15-year-old or something. Like, so that was it. Blew my mind, and I watched all of that and was obsessed with the Beatles to the point it ruined me getting into music of my own generation, really, because I listened to nothing else. Couldn't get past it.
I bet when you first heard them, you thought, God, this band sound like Oasis.
Well, actually, that was kind of the thing. I was so into the Beatles, it took me longer to get into Oasis when they were out and massive and everyone was into them. And then because I was too into the Beatles, and then I got into Oasis just after everyone else and just before Be Here Now, where it all went wrong.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, their obsession with the Beatles overtook them, didn't it? Because they found it more and more difficult to disguise what they were nicking from the Beatles.
I don't think Noel Gallagher really tried to disguise he was nicking it.
No.
To be fair to him, I think he was pretty, I know. But, so yeah, you did get into the Beatles until, well, how did you get into the Beatles? How did you get into the Beatles then?
Well, I'd always heard them, because, I was born in 1967, so I guess they were they're just everywhere in popular culture. So
Wow,
you just
when you were in your
knowing
cot,
them.
when you were in your cot, there was like Revolver was blaring.
Yeah. Well, actually, my parents weren't that cool, so they probably didn't have Revolver, but I would have been hearing bits and bobs. You just hear it, don't you, on the radio, and you grow up. It's just sort of in your psyche. But I didn't realise how cool they were. I think that's the other thing. As a kid, you think of the mop tops and the silly jackets and the screaming girls, and I just thought that's not very cool. And much later on, you listen to Sgt. Pepper's and realise, oh my God, this changed music forever. And still to this day, you can put that album on and marvel at what a piece of art that is. It's an amazing piece of art that very few other bands have achieved that level of original thought. I guess they were making brand new sounds.
It's still used as that, like that phrase, isn't it? Now it's like the Sgt. Pepper of albums, the benchmark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But So you've still got loads of vinyl. How long ago did you buy a record player again?
I guess about 5 or 6 years ago. And the first thing I did was repurchase albums that I'd only ever owned on CD, and one or two that I'd only ever had as downloads, because I wanted to hear them on vinyl.
See, I've got a weird thing of that I don't. I like buying albums on vinyl that were probably recorded to be on vinyl, but the ones that were recorded, how do you feel about that? The ones that were recorded, say, in the 90s that were planned to be on CD or tape, that, they never even considered it being on vinyl. A lot of them. Oh,
I suppose you're right. They don't have that heritage, but there is still something happening when the needle hits the vinyl that for me, it just, you feel like you're picking out the instruments, and with a good recording, it feels like you're in the recording studio listening to, the bass guitars over there and the drums over there and the keyboards over here. And it sort of separates all the instruments out and then brings them back in together in a way that perhaps, it might be my imagination, but that's how it sounds to me, that it feels like I'm hearing the musicians playing. And so I think it's always good to hear vinyl. But most of the albums I bought were recorded to be on vinyl in the first place. or cassette
That's
tape.
what I mean.
I had loads of
Yeah.
cassette tapes.
See, you've changed my opinion now. I've been a bit staunch of that opinion. That's a good point.
The weird thing is, when CDs first came out, they were sold to us as the most modern and brilliant sounding of all music formats. It was sold to us as far better than the crackly vinyl that we had, and I remember that thing of putting a CD in the very first time I bought myself a CD player and pressing play and not hearing anything until the first bit of music started, and that being mind-blowing in itself, because we were used to hearing either a cassette tape starting up with that weird sound, or putting a record on and hearing a few crackles or just a pop before the first you know what I mean, before the first bar of the music. But CD, you'd press play and the first thing you would hear is the first piece of the music, and it was amazing. Just that blew our minds.
Which is quite funny. That's how it should be. But now you really nostalgically hark back to, I want a bit of crackle. A lot of hip hop deliberately puts crackle over the tune, like with the samples, just to add that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, talking of hip hop, I didn't mention this yet, but every now and then I still have to go back and listen to this Black Sunday, the Cypress Hill album. Are you familiar with it?
I know Cypress Hill, but I'm not really into hip hop. But I do like it when I hear it, but I haven't bought any. But have you been really into hip hop?
Well, I was just reminded of it from the crackle, because there's quite a bit of crackle on that, deliberately put there, and it's just an amazing album. It's just if you every now and then when I talk to people about hip hop, that era, that early 90s era of hip hop was some of the best, I think. And Cypress Hill, it's funny, it's dark, it's got some scary lyrics on it, and it's also got some hilarious lyrics on it. But it's just beautiful. It's just a wonderful piece of work. So if you've not heard it, I'd love you to go and listen to that.
That is one of the things that I want to do on this podcast, is get at least one good recommendation from people to try and, because I can be quite narrow-minded with music. I admit it. I can be fairly, if it's not got a guitar from the 90s, I'm not interested. But I try not to be, and I should try and branch out more. And that could be my gateway drug into hip hop. A bit of Cypress Hill.
Man. Do it, bro.
You've educated me. So that, and buy some vinyl of stuff that was meant to be on tape or CD. It's still worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I've taken from this podcast. And also, if anyone else wants to listen to them albums, definitely give that a go. Cypress Hill, Black Sunday. But an album you definitely need to listen to is your album, Ben Norris, Moral Vacuum. It's brilliant.
Yes.
I really like the album cover as well. You must have been chuffed with that. I mean, we've all got in our head, if you had your own album, how cool you'd make the cover look.
Yeah.
And you've nailed it with that. It's brilliant.
Well, do you know what? I had a real bit of luck. One night when we were doing The Edge, the Cutting Edge at the Comedy Store, these two slightly drunk 55-year-old blokes burst into the dressing room after the show.
This doesn't sound like you immediately, does it?
and
sounds annoying, but yeah.
Well, it would have been annoying, but they were quite nice guys, and they just wanted to chat because one of them knew another member of the team. But his mate was, I got chatting to his mate, and he was a rock photographer. I thought, I must get this bloke's phone number. And I took his number. And then when I was doing the album cover, I remembered that I had this bloke's number, and I rang him, and he lived in Peckham Rye, which isn't far from where I live. And I just basically talked him into doing photography for my album cover. I said, look, I've got no money or hardly anything. Would you take my picture? And he's taken, he's done Bowie and Sting and, you name Prince. He had a whole list of big stars that he's photographed. And he agreed if I would, come to his house and make love with him. No, if I would come to his house and, he didn't have to do much. So I'd had the idea for the album cover of Moral Vacuum, and I took my Henry Hoover and my guitar with me to his house, and he'd set up a little studio in his lounge. And that was the picture that we took loads of pictures, but we chose that picture of me with the guitar looking like it's plugged into a Henry Hoover. And it just, he just gave it that look of a proper picture, and it just made the album cover look really good. So I was very pleased with that. Yeah, really pleased with that.
Yeah, it does look proper. It does look proper rock star photo as well. I don't know how, there must be something he does, but he's nailed it with that.
Yeah.
He must have been chuffed with that. So yeah, the album cover looks proper cool, and it's like, all you're hoping for with an album from a comedian is it's funny, and it's definitely like really, really funny, but proper catchy tunes. If you're not want to listen to an album for it to be funny, this is still, I mean, if you're going to waste your time and start writing about love, you could do that, but I suggest you don't do that. But yeah, no, definitely buy this album, people who have not got it. Could you just go to your website and get it, bennorris.co.uk?
Yeah, there's a link there, or on my Twitter, Benny_Norris. There's a link on the Twitter actually to all the different ways you can listen to it, and places you can buy it either as a download or as a real CD. And if you buy the real CD, I sign it and post it to you myself. And it'll have just a little bit of COVID on the envelope, but don't worry, just don't open it for a week after it arrives.
Yeah, self-isolate the album for up to 14 days, and then you're going to have yourself a good listen. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, mate. Good luck with this podcast. It's a really good idea. I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks for having me on, mate. Loved it.
Well, I don't know how you hang up now.
A podcast from producer Paul.co.uk.